In this video, we'll walk you step by step through the process of replacing the front brake pads and rotors on a Ford Explorer. This is a straightforward job that you can do at home using basic hand tools. At the end of the video, I'll go over a complete list of the tools and parts you'll need, and you'll also find links in the description below to everything that was used for this job. Before we touch anything on the brakes, we first need to put the electronic parking brake into maintenance mode. This step is important, and it has to be done in the correct order. Start by turning the ignition on by pressing the start button without pressing the brake pedal so the engine does not start. Next, release the electronic parking brake. Now press the accelerator pedal all the way down and keep it fully depressed. While holding the accelerator, press the electronic parking brake switch down and hold it in that position as well. While continuing to hold the accelerator pedal and the parking brake switch, turn the ignition off and then back on. You'll hear the parking brake disengage, and once that sound stops, turn the ignition off again. After that, release the accelerator pedal and the parking brake switch. If the procedure was performed correctly, you'll see some warning messages appear on the dashboard. At this point, the brakes are in maintenance mode. Before lifting the front of the vehicle, loosen the wheel bolts using a 21mm socket and a breaker bar, but don't remove them just yet. Now we can lift the vehicle. Since the Explorer doesn't have a central front jacking point that raises both sides at once, we'll raise one side at a time. Place the hydraulic jack beneath the front subframe at the reinforced ribbed section and carefully lift one side of the vehicle until the wheel is off the ground. Install a jack stand at the designated support point along the sill, then gently lower the vehicle onto the stand. Once that side is secure, raise the opposite side until both front wheels are fully off the ground. Now remove the loosened wheel bolts completely, take the wheel off, and set it aside. With the wheel removed, we now have clear access to the brake assembly. Next, on the back of the brake assembly, remove the two bolts that secure the caliper to the caliper bracket. These bolts are typically removed using a 14mm socket, although some trim levels may use a 17mm. Once the bolts are out, carefully slide the caliper away from the rotor. Don't let the caliper hang by the brake hose, as this can cause damage. Instead, use an S-hook or zip ties to hang the caliper from the suspension. While doing this, make sure the rubber brake hose is not twisted or kinked. Pry the old brake pads out of the caliper bracket and put them aside. Now remove the two caliper bracket bolts located on the back side of the wheel hub using an 18mm socket. These bolts are usually installed with thread locker and are very tight, so a breaker bar will make this step much easier. Ford recommends replacing these bolts, but since they are not stretch bolts, they can be reused as long as you apply fresh thread locker during reinstallation. Once the bolts are removed, take the caliper bracket off and set it aside. With the caliper and bracket out of the way, we can now remove the brake rotor. Use a hammer and a block of wood to strike the rotor and break it free from the wheel hub. If the rotor is seized and doesn't come loose right away, spray penetrating oil around the wheel studs and allow it to soak in for a few minutes. After that, repeat the hammering process until the rotor breaks free and can be removed. Now we can thoroughly clean the wheel hub surface where the rotor sits. Use a wire brush, either by hand or attached to a drill, to remove rust and debris, and then wipe the surface down with brake cleaner. These mating surfaces must be clean and rust-free to prevent brake vibration. After cleaning, apply a thin layer of anti-seize to the hub surface to make future rotor removal easier. Now let's clean up the rest of the brake hardware. Remove the old brake pad clips from the caliper bracket and carefully take the slide pins out of the bracket. Use a wire brush and brake cleaner to clean the contact areas where the clips install, removing any rust or buildup to ensure the new clips sit correctly in the bracket. Be careful not to damage the rubber guide pin boots while using the wire brush. Also apply some brake cleaner inside the guide pin bores and scrub them with a nylon brush to remove the old grease and buildup. Use brake cleaner to thoroughly clean the slide pins and wipe them dry. Then apply a thin layer of brake grease to prepare them for reinstallation. Also apply a thin layer of brake grease to the contact surfaces in the caliper bracket where the clips will sit. Then install the new clips that came with your brake pads. Make sure each clip is fully seated and positioned correctly, with the curled edge facing outward. Before we begin reinstalling the parts on the vehicle, also apply a small amount of brake grease to the ears of the brake pads. These are the areas that will slide into the clips we just installed in the bracket. Be careful to avoid getting any grease on the friction surface of the pads. Now we're ready to begin reassembly. Before installing the new rotor, check that the mounting surface is clean and free of rust or dirt, and clean it if needed using a wire brush and brake cleaner. Slide the rotor onto the wheel hub and secure it temporarily with a single lug nut, so it stays in place during the next steps. Before reinstalling the caliper bracket onto the wheel hub, clean the 2 bolts using a wire brush to remove any old thread locker. Apply a little bit of new thread locker to the bolts. Then position the caliper bracket over the new rotor and secure it to the wheel hub using the 2 bolts using an 18mm socket. Once installed, torque them to 122 pound-feet or 165 Newton-meters. Now, take the new brake pads and slide them into the caliper bracket. Position one edge of the pad against the spring tension of the clips, then press the clips down slightly as you guide the pad into place until it seats fully. Apply some brake quiet or brake grease to the backing plates of the pads to help prevent noise and squeaking during braking. Now reinstall the slide pins into the caliper bracket. The pin with the plastic bushing at the tip should be installed in the lower bore. Slide the pin into place and make sure the rubber boot seats properly over the pin. Once both pins are installed, confirm that they move freely in and out. Before reinstalling the caliper, we need to compress the pistons. First, open the hood and locate the brake fluid reservoir under the plastic cover near the windshield. Then remove the reservoir cap to prevent pressure buildup when we compress the pistons. Check the fluid level, since compressing the pistons will cause the level to rise. If necessary, remove a small amount of fluid from the reservoir using a plastic syringe or turkey baster. Back at the caliper, place an old brake pad against the pistons and use a caliper compression tool or a C-clamp to slowly press the pistons back into the caliper. The old brake pad helps distribute the pressure evenly and keeps the pistons straight as they retract. While doing this, periodically check the brake fluid reservoir to make sure it isn't overflowing. Once the pistons are fully compressed, slide the caliper over the new brake pads. In order to position the caliper into place, you may need to push the 2 slide pins inward to create enough clearance. Make sure the brake hose is routed correctly and is not twisted or kinked. Next, reinstall the 2 mounting bolts. Torque the caliper bolts according to bolt size. M8 bolts need to be torqued to 20 pound-feet or 27 Newton-meters. M10 bolts must be torqued to 34 pound-feet or 46 Newton-meters. Spray the rotor with brake cleaner and wipe it down to remove any grease or residue, rotating it as you clean to reach the entire surface. Take off the temporary lug nut that was holding the rotor in position. Then mount the wheel back onto the hub. Install the wheel bolts and tighten them by hand until they are finger tight. Repeat the entire process on the other front wheel. When finished, lower the vehicle back to the ground and torque the wheel bolts to 150 pound-feet or 204 Newton meters. Now, go back under the hood and confirm that the brake fluid level is between the minimum and maximum marks, and then reinstall the reservoir cap and the plastic cover. We can now take the brakes out of maintenance mode. First, pump the brake pedal several times until it feels firm. It may feel soft at first, but this is normal as the caliper pistons move back into position. Then turn the ignition on without starting the engine. Press and hold the accelerator pedal. Then pull up and hold the electronic parking brake switch. While holding both, press the brake pedal for at least 1 second. Release the brake pedal, but continue holding the accelerator pedal and parking brake switch. Turn the ignition off and then back on and listen as the electronic parking brake re-engages. After the sound stops, you can release the accelerator pedal and the parking brake switch. The warning message and parking brake light should disappear, indicating the system is reactivated. Finally, bed in your new brakes according to the manufacturer's instructions. This typically involves a series of stops from about 30 down to 5 miles per hour without coming to a complete stop. This process transfers a layer of pad material onto the rotor and ensures the best braking performance and pad life. Now, for a quick overview of the tools and parts we've used, you'll need a hydraulic jack and jack stands, a ratchet with a 14 or 17 millimeter socket depending on your trim level, as well as 18 and 21 millimeter sockets. You'll also need a torque wrench and a breaker bar, a caliper compression tool or C-clamp, an S-hook or zip ties, a wire brush, and a small nylon brush. In terms of parts and supplies, you'll need new brake pads and rotors, brake grease, anti-seize, brake quiet, and finally some thread locker and brake cleaner. And that's it. You've successfully replaced the front brake pads and rotors on your Ford Explorer. If this video helped you out, consider giving it a like and subscribe for more DIY maintenance guides. Thanks for watching.